All right, man. We're going to talk about chapters 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, 9, and 10 in James Joyce's Ulysses today. Remember that on Friday we have a seminar. Note also that the rubrics for the final essays have been posted. So I'm interested in hearing some of your thoughts and questions on those which feature Ulysses very prominently on Friday during our forum. All right. Last time we finished the first 3 chapters, which comprised the first of 3 sections in Ulysses called the Telemachia, where we followed Stephen Daedalus, first from his breakfast table, Buck Mulligan and Haynes, then to Dalkey, where he taught a class, and we met Mr. Deasy, the Nestorian analog, and then we watched him along Sandy Mount Strand, having a bit of a thought about the ineluctable modalities of the visual and the audible, the Nacheinander, the one after another, and the Nebeneinander, the near one another, next to each other, neighbor. Then in 4, we move to the second longest part of Ulysses with the analog to Ulysses or Odysseus, Leopold Bloom, and focused on many of the differences between him and Odysseus. Odysseus is often seen as a foreign and strange man, the places that he goes, as well as his home. This is a similarity between him and Bloom. But unlike Bloom, who won't be cheated on, who will act autoerotically on himself, will have to settle for images and substitutes of what he wants. In the same way that one looking at pornography is accepting a substitute for the carnal act, or the way in which one reads literature portraying a romantic relationship is using the good feeling that is shared between characters to replicate in oneself the feeling of having a romantic relationship, perhaps even at your age, learning about it as a propedeutic. How is one supposed to act within a relationship? Ostensibly, you see your parents and the people around you, but ostensibly also, you've watched many stories, you've read many stories, you've heard many stories that model the ways to act in order to make such relationships salubrious, in the ways in which to act, in which to shatter and crack such relationships. In chapter 5, we move from Bloom's home out into the city. The correlate, the correlate from the Odyssey in this chapter 5 is the Lotus Eaters. The Lotus Eaters in the Odyssey is a very short section, but a section that captures people's imaginations. The Lotus Eaters are known not to be eaters of bread. This is Homeric speaking for these are strange individuals who ingest strange things. They are, by definition, strange. Because I imagine the Homeric idea is that all normal people who speak Greek and honor the so-called xenia, guest-host relationship. Remember, you are xenophobic if you hate foreigners. But interesting to see, xenia means guest / host, also means stranger. So xenia means the relationship between the guest and the host. Interestingly enough. So the Lotus Eaters, do they honor the xenia? Well, they don't attempt really to harm Odysseus's men. He had just, on his own journey, witnessed a tribal band of allies to the Trojans. He had defeated the Trojans, and on his way home from the Trojans, he continued his raiding and pillaging. Something about the ancient Greeks is that to be a pirate was a noble endeavor, in the same way that in the Middle Ages, during the feudal times, to be a knight who pillaged the peasants along the countryside was also a noble or elite activity. So after Odysseus attacks, defeats these Cacones, and then is counterattacked and further defeated, loses some men, he runs up upon these odd people who eat lotus, the honeydew lotus. And what do they do all day? Well, they remind me a little bit of 60s or 70s college students. What do I mean? Well, I mean probably what you're thinking if you've seen Dazed and Confused, but they kind of lie around in a field all day. We don't get a lot of information about this. They aren't going anywhere. They just hang out. Why? Well, apparently this lotus that they eat, that we think is some sort of form of an undistilled opium and an opioid, Something you may know about opioids is they're analgesics. They cause one to stop feeling pain. And something about pain is it's very motivating. So the moment somebody stops feeling say the pain of physical pain or even anxiety, sometimes analgesics are also anxiolytics, as it were, then one kind of is happy to hang out because there's nothing really that needs to be done. So this lotus is stupefying. And two of Odysseus's men have the lotus, and they're really happy to just hang out and never make it home. In fact, Odysseus supposedly has to drag them back by their scruffs while they're kicking and screaming for more lotus. So what is this chapter in Ireland in the early 20th century, in 1904, going to be about? It is going to be about the sensual things that people occupy their days with in order to get through the day, but really just to spend their day without getting any. What do I? Well, let me start with the first paragraph. Let me trust that this slide has what it is that I want to say. By lorries along Sir John Rogerson's quay, notice that's quay, not quay, Mr. Bloom walked soberly. Note these emboldened words, soberly. This is a contrast word to be drunk, to be inebriated, as it were. Past Windmill Lane, least the linseed crushers, excuse me. The Postal Telegraph Office, Dublin in 1904 is coming to life for us. Could have given that address to and passed the sailor's home, returned from the morning noises of the quayside and walked through Vine Street. By Brady's cottages, a boy with skins lolled, not LOL. His buck of awful length, smoking a chewed fag butt. Fag butt means the butt of a cigarette in English dialogue in the 20th century. So he's chewing on his cigarette. Smaller girl with scars of eczema on her forehead eyed him, listlessly holding her battered cat suit. Tell him if he smokes, he won't grow. Oh, let him, his life isn't such a bed of roses. Waiting outside pubs to bring to home, come home to ma, the slack hour won't be many there. So even in the first paragraph, we get indications that this is going to be a chapter about inebriation, about intoxication, about keeping one's mind during the course of a day when there are many influences that seek to steal it away. What is to be sober, not to be drunk, not to drink? What happens exactly when one drinks? One feels certain emotions, but one's horizon of action decreases. How many, is one less or more capable of achieving things while drunk? Now, there might be certain things that one is more capable of achieving while drunk, but your technical skill, for example, is going to go down. You're not supposed to drive, for example. You are vitiated, depotentiated to some extent. What is smoking? Smoking is an excellent example of what this chapter is about. Because literally, what do you do when you smoke? You just sit there and take time. You're taking a break. It's called a smoke break. In fact, I don't know if you've ever been a server or server who has a smoker as somebody on your team, but legally, at least a few years back, it was illegal to deny smokers smoke breaks. So my server friends could every hour take a 5 to 10 minute smoke break, which, you know, if you work a 6 to 8 hour shift as a shift worker, usually you get like 15 to 30 minutes break total. And so I always thought that was sort of a bummer. Let's see. Also, roses. We have this expression in our own language: stop and smell the roses. So to smoke, to drink, to smell the beautiful things. These are moments. This is a description of moments and things one can fill one's life with if one wishes to fill one's life with minor pleasures that do not get one anywhere. Pleasures that have nothing to do with achievement or attainment in particular. And notice also, very, very cleverly thrown in here by James Joyce at the end, come home at the end of this. These are all figures who are away from their homes, who are spending their times in idleness without making. All right, let's see. Homer's lotus eaters are peaceful people who survive off the narcotic lotus flower called nepenthe in Greek. Odysseus, who always keeps his wits. In fact, this is what he is beloved by Athena, goddess of wisdom, about. When they speak face to face, though Odysseus doesn't know he's speaking to Athena, or so beware the gods, students. She says, this is precisely what I love about you, because he tries to lie to her, to her face. She says, you're always keeping your wits. You're always trying to get one over on other people. This is what I love about you. You might imagine that if your mind could talk to you, which perhaps it can, it would really love when you keep it unadulterated, when you keep it on the straight and narrow, as it were, when you keep it functioning at its highest pitch. Odysseus, as usual, avoids the dangerous food and uses his intellect to save his men. This will come up over and over and over again, but particularly in the Isle of Helios, not eating something prohibited by the gods will save his life, but also when he makes it to the Isle of Circe, his men are turned into pigs because they eat the food of Circe. And so perhaps what I'm saying to you is, when you go out to eat, really make sure that the food that's being fed to you is quality controlled. I think particularly in our culture, where not only do you not know the chefs preparing your food, no, you probably don't know where the food came from, whether even from this state, a different state, and then you probably don't even know how it was stored, how it was picked, what pesticides were put onto it. This is the sort of thing that you can really look into if you want to become an expert. But the question of whether the food you are receiving is actually, and again, I use this word salubrious, like salvific, but a little bit more physically oriented, is it going to cause you health? Or is it going to give you the opposite? And in fact, are there certain things that you can ingest that not only lead to a decline in physical health, but like this lotus can lead to a decline in mental, psychic health, can in fact keep you from seeing the truth, can affect your perspective in order to limit it and to draw it in. Perhaps Joyce, like Homer, is telling us something about the true power of a drug in whatever form it happens to come our way. That such powers are soporific to our intellects. Soporific means causative of drowsiness, sleeping. English professor in the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Wit has to explain the meaning of soporific to a nurse that's caring for her as she dies from cancer. And you may yourselves remember a very, very famous movie based on a Frank Baum book that involves a certain flower that puts people to sleep. Which movie am I thinking of, and which flower? Very famous scene. I could do my best at being Stephen Daedalus's father and say, poppies, poppies. Pretty good, right? Which movie? The Wizard of Oz, poppies. And what is poppy? What is a poppy? It's an opioid, by the way. It puts people to sleep. This is why you're not supposed to eat, this might be a folktale, but you're not supposed to eat poppy seed muffins before you take a drug test. Particularly if you also take opiates. Or maybe you could use that as an excuse. I don't know, that's not what I said. In any case, in this chapter, we see that one of the major struggles of Bloom, of Odysseus, of an everyday person is to avoid these soporific influences, these things that steal your agency and your autonomy without you even knowing, while making you feel, pretty pleasant, sniffing the flowers, taking a drag on a cigarette, having a drink. These are things that are pleasant. People do these things precisely because they're pleasant, not because they're salubrious. Lots of people smoke. Everybody knows about lung cancer. Nowadays, lots of people drink. Everybody knows that it degenerates your prefrontal cortex and can lead to alcoholism, and also unwanted weight gain. Everybody knows these things, and yet, why do we indulge? Because for no reason except because they feel good. And so, perhaps Bloom is going to have to keep himself from the common pleasures of those around him if he wishes to have an uncommon fate among those who surround him. So Bloom passes a smoking man and then an Oriental tea shop, which is not something we go into quite a lot in this text, but this is a term that you need to know really, or excuse me, a term you need to know for this particular chapter, the idea of Orientalism. The idea of Orientalism is that those of us in the Occidents, as it were, Orient means east, in Latin. That's why you orient yourself and become disoriented. And then the oscillans is the so-called West. But to orientalize the East is to think of everything Eastern as exotic. So you think of, say, Princess Jasmine and Aladdin, or you think of these fancy teas that come from there. To think that there are magic carpets and sphinxes, and that the mundane is not a part of the existence of the East, is to project one's fantasy of that which is different onto a people rather than to investigate who they truly are. And that is what it means to orientalize somebody. In fact, claim I might make is that perhaps this is something that is done to Bloom by those around him, that he himself is sometimes orientalized. And remember also that Molly from Gibraltar, which is east of Ireland, a little bit darker, a little bit mysterious to the people around her. Perhaps she too is orientalized, and that is part of her appeal, as it were. All right. He imagines the lethargy of the East. And so Bloom is thinking about the East, about tea, about smoking, about losing his train of thought. In fact, something, not to bring up present things too much, but something that a former president then of ours was known to do was called anacolethon. A literary term that means to break off your thought in the middle of it. This happens multiple times throughout this chapter. Bloom becomes so drowsy by thinking that he doesn't even finish his thoughts. Even at the end, especially at the end of the chapter, he does this as well. This is while he imagines the listlessness and the ease of the recumbent life of the East. Why might he be imagining such a lot? Why might he be focusing on these things? What is it that one is looking for when one turns to a drug? A drug that is analgesic or anxiolytic. One seems to be looking for a way to get rid of something that is always with somebody, whether it be physical pain or mental pain. And so we know that Leopold Bloom has things on his mind that cause him pain. The suicide of his father, long ago, still causes him pain every single day. Death of his son, the fact that his daughter is growing up and may soon herself supplant his or usurp his or supplant his role in her life with a young suitor. The fact that his wife is intending this very day, to his knowledge, to sleep on him. There are a lot of reasons for Bloom to go get drunk. He's not going to do anything anyway. He might want to just not feel, not think about the things that are going on in his day. And yet he is subverted because the thoughts in his head, things that he is going through, are so present to him that he cannot escape them, though he might try. And so, what do I mean by this? Well, Bloom, good timing there. Wow. Bloom, not only does he go to a tea shop, and he goes to a tea shop, he goes later to a druggist. And I'm going to mention two things before I mention what I was just going to point out, which is that his memory is shown to be a little bit lacking here. He is not totally not subject to the various soporific effects of that which is around him. He had meant to put his key back into his pocket because he is wearing black pants because he is going to a funeral today. He forgot to do that. He meant also to take the recipe for a certain lotion to the druggist, which nowadays would be a pharmacist, but he had forgotten to do that too. Luckily, the druggist has on file what Molly likes. So how does Bloom look for weak joy? He doesn't yet drink. He will drink during the day. He's not a smoker. He goes to the post office. Now, this is kind of odd to us because we know that he has already received two mails through the post, or two pieces of mail through the post at home. One to Mrs. Marion Bloom, which indicated to us the bold hand of Blazes Boylan, who has designs on Molly this very day. The second was from Millie Bloom, outlining the fact that she is growing up and may soon have a boyfriend. But where is this letter from, and to whom is it addressed, and from whom does it come? Well, this piece of mail that Bloom picks up, Leopold Bloom, is addressed to one Henry Flower. Brilliant name, right? And Henry, what has he done to it? This is his name. This is the name that he has given to something. What has he done by calling himself Henry? This is something that many people with very Asian sounding names often do when they come to America. Leopold, the People's Prince, it's not a very English name, but Henry, he'll blend right in. Flower seems pretty connected to Bloom. So the name itself seems like a revised, anglified version of his name. And so why is he giving a pseudonym in the first place? Well, apparently he put, remember he works with the two newspapers in Ireland, the Daily Telegraph or the Evening Telegraph, and I'm forgetting the name of the second one, but I have it on the slide, so I'll come up with it in a moment. But he works with these newspapers, something that you used to be able to put into a newspaper, and you still can, but you probably don't check them, are personal ads, advertising for things that you need. Like in this case, lady typist needed for great literary endeavor. So Leopold Bloom, under the pseudonym of Henry Flower, is trying to elicit a typist for a great literary work. That sounds a little bit like Stephen Dedalus. He doesn't actually want to write a great literary work. He wants to elicit the attention of somebody who might be a typist. At this point in the game, in the early 20th century, to be a typist is most likely to be female, a secretarial skill at that. He wishes to acquire the interest of a lady. And what is the name of the lady? Her name is Martha Clifford, and she is in fact a typist, and this is the second letter that she has sent to this Henry Flower, and in it doesn't seem very professional, the things that they talk about. She asks him a pretty scandalous question, by the way. She says, I'd really like to know the perfume that your wife wears. And then she calls him a naughty boy, too. But then she also sort of subverts herself, because Leopold Bloom, you might imagine, is looking for someone sort of at least kind of intellectually equivalent to him. And yet she does things like misspell the word word, misspells it with the word world. Instead of having patience, CE at the end, the singular noun, she says that she has patience, like what a doctor has in the plural. But when Bloom reads this letter from a woman who is not his wife, this letter from a woman, not physical embrace of the woman, nor even a real conversation in the person of her, experiences weak joy. Isn't that wonderful? Can you imagine? Think of the things that cause you joy. Please give me 2 or 3 examples of just like, maybe think about yourself when you're younger. I'll say something. Waking up on my birthday. Bam. Great feeling. What else? Like real joy, not ironic joy. Yes. Christmas. Christmas can be a wonderful feeling. I know there will be one person in here who's like, this terrible thing happened on Christmas, and I'm sorry, but this happens to everybody. Everything that's good for everybody gets ruined for somebody at some point. So keep that in mind. Keep Ulysses in mind. What else? What's like a real joy? About asking somebody out and them saying yes. That's real, right? Or being asked out. Oh my goodness. By somebody that, it's not awkward and you're like, oh no, I don't feel that way about it. But it's like, you're like, oh, thank you. Weak joy. Weak joy is more like what? You get a notification on your social media that somebody likes something. It's good-ish, but it's not much. It'd be much better if you had a real moment of satisfaction with your friend, right? This weak joy itself is attempting to imitate which is missing from Bloom's life, which we can clearly see already. What is the most significant relationship in Bloom's life? The relationship to his wife. What is missing from his life? Physical intimacy with his wife, and perhaps also the accompanying emotional intimacy that they have been denied for the last 10 years as they have not engaged in the carnal act with each other, as they have avoided each other. So now we see Molly moving to one direction to take Blazes Boylan into her bed. We see Bloom also moving in a different direction, attempting to entice the affections of a lady typist. And again, in this sort of in this very mediated and unsatisfying way, right? He is reading her words. His name is a false name. She is not even spelling the words correctly. It is hard to maintain the illusion of this being a very joyful letter. And his friend McCoy, as he's reading it, comes by as he's trying to enjoy it, and he has to stuff it into his pants. Because, obviously, he does not want anybody to know about this affair. One thing that we will discover in chapter 18 is that guess who does know about this and has known about it the entire time and has partially used this as a justification for what she herself has done. Clever, clever Molly. She is no fool. Even if she doesn't know what metempsychosis means, it doesn't mean that she doesn't have her eyes wide open. All right, so, okay. And then just go backwards. Good. So weak joy takes hold. You can't get rid of this McCoy fellow. He just wants to read his letter. And what does this McCoy do? So we've talked about how things that Bloom carry come up over and over again. And so he's just found out in the first, in chapter 4, about Blazes Boylan's intentions from this letter that was being hidden from him, that had this curious name on the front. And what is it that McCoy asks him? I encourage you in this instance to put your mind in the gutter and to listen to the words in this expression, because they evoke precisely to Bloom what they evoke to you. McCoy says, oh, a concert tour. Who's getting it up? Frozen smile hits our face because erection, our hair stands on end. Because what is it that Bloom hears when he hears this question? He doesn't just hear who is putting on the show, who is getting the funds together to put this show on and dealing with the various logistics of having a very talented singer. Molly is an extraordinarily talented opera singer, by the way, so she has a prestigious job. She is a performer. Getting it up. Of course, that means putting together the production, but it also has a much more vulgar, sensual, erotic meaning. And precisely because of what Bloom knows is going to happen this day, that's already in the works. When he hears that language, strikes him to the quick, hurts him. It's not language that would hurt anyone else who wasn't going through the same situation, and yet to him, hears it with specific force. This is the sort of thing that he is trying to get away from. He's trying to read his letter from Martha Clifford to just have a little bit of respite from this terrible day. In fact, there's an advertising campaign that's going on. I think it's Burger King that's putting it right out. That's putting it out right now, and they're using this very idea to try and sell ice cream. They're saying, just take a little break. Just take a little break, right? Just have a little break. The things that often tell you to take a little break are often the things that will kill you in the long run, by the way. Just take a little break, but then fill your life with breaks. Perhaps your whole life becomes just something which has unfortunately been broken off. McCoy then also asks Bloom to put his name down at Patty Dignam's funeral. Another indignity that Bloom will deal with is that his fellow newspaperman will be at Patty Dignam's funeral, taking down the names of the attendees, and will misspell Bloom's name as L. Boom, but will put McCoy's name down, even though McCoy will not have actually attended. So Bloom then attends a mass, and for very faithful people, they often start to adopt a dislike of Bloom at this time. Remember that Bloom's religion is itself sort of a confused mess. His dad, Virag, He's ethnically Jewish, but he converted to Protestantism to marry Bloom's Catholic mother. Protestantism was good enough. Bloom himself claims that he has been baptized 3 times, which is seemingly impossible because he's never baptized as a Jew. He's just perceived as a Jew. He's baptized first as a Protestant and then as a Catholic prior to marrying Molly. But you might understand him to have sort of a cosmopolitan view of what religion is then. Is any religion truly Bloom's? So when he sits down and he listens to, and this is something you may or may not, are any of you, and you don't need to admit this, but you know, if you have some pride in it, any of you big-time Catholics and you know a little bit about Catholic history, particularly in the 20th century? It's okay, but there was a very, very big moment in the 20th century for Catholicism, where this thing called Vatican II happened. Ecumenical council. It's happened a lot more frequently. And at the ecumenical council, a couple of things were decided, but one very big thing was that the Mass, the Holy Roman Catholic Mass, which had only ever I need to look into this, but around 1,000 years been spoken in Latin, would now be able to be translated and given in the vernacular languages, the vulgar languages, as it were. So prior to Vatican II, which is in the 1940s, 1950s, about 30 or 40 years before this book takes place, all Latin masses were read in Latin, or all Roman masses were read in Latin. This is, you might think that odd, but if, say, you go to a Muslim mosque, the Quran will only ever be recited in classical Arabic, not even, it's not even supposed to be translated into Lamia. So Latin was the holy language of the Christians. Some might still think that. But when Bloom hears this holy language, which he does not understand because he does not have a Catholic education, he sees it different. He says, pretty clever to say things like introibo ad altare Dei, because when you're speaking to the common people and they hear this magical sorceress tongue, in fact, you know that J.K. Rowling's many of the spells that she creates, Cruciatus, for example, or Avada Kedavra, have Latinic roots. Spelliarmus, in fact, Spelliarmus takes on a first-person plural form of a verb. Mus means we do something in Latin. So Bloom thinks, very clever. You kind of put people's wits to sleep by speaking in a different language because they think it's sort of an alien, sophisticated language, and they don't listen for what is actually being said, but sort of let it wash over one, let it push one's wits away rather than engage one's wits. It's supposed to be the opposite of what a lecture does, by the way. It's supposed to wake your wits up, take a little bit more focus, be a little bit less comfortable. But Bloom's perception of the church is it's pretty nice and dark, nice art around here. It's a guy speaking a language I don't understand. I get to sit down. It's got a bit of a soporific effect. And if you've ever been to a church, probably you at some point felt something somewhat similar to what Bloom is feeling here. But he's looking at the church, not in a holy way, not in a heretical way either, but in a practical way. What is it that they're trying to achieve with this performance? Well, after that, he then goes to a Turkish bath, an Eastern, an Oriental bath. And in this bath, he thinks about adding water to water. This is him again thinking about autoerotic behavior, the sort of thing one might do in a bath while alone, if one happens to be Bloom. And he lies there recumbent. You know, this is a really interesting beginning of the day. He's got a funeral, he's got a bath. He actually takes baths, unlike Stephen. This is a really, I might say, pleasant start to the day, right? He's cooking food, feeds the cat, gets to go for a walk, taking care of some things. Won't go to work until around the middle of the day, interestingly. But something I have to include here, because this mentions, this brings up his relationship to Rudy, is that, and this is a sordid detail if ever, well, there are many sordid details here, is while he is lying in front of him, he is a man, he is an unshaved man, he is unshaved, he is not a swimmer, for example, and he sees various hairs on his body rise in the water. And he tries to think about the equation for density that Archimedes first came up with, and he can't quite do it. He's forgetting himself. And as he sees the hair on the front of his body, particularly around his hips, rise, he is again thinking of an Eastern image. The Eastern image of what? If you're a yogi, you've probably seen these before. The image of a lotus flower unfurling. But the irony, sting, the terrible sting of this, even this association hits him when he thinks, well, at the end of the chapter, he goes to a Turkish bath and looking at his own nether regions, and comparing them to a plant. This is how he compares it. The limp father of thousands, a languid floating flower, the limp father of thousands. We all know, I think, some basic anatomy and physiology. If a human is to become a father, limp is not how we're going to get the job done. Why does he think of himself as a limp father of thousands, maybe as a lame father of thousands, as a potential but failed father of thousands, as one who has not been fruitful and multiplied, as the biblical dictum tells one to, because his son died. Because his son died, he hasn't had the courage to try to have another son. Because regardless of whether he's Jewish or Christian in this particular, according to this particular maxim, it is his duty to be fruitful and multiply. And so why would he not do this? What would keep him from this biblical maxim? Remember, Simon Daedalus' father, the contemporary of Bloom, has like 12 children. Bloom has one. Seems to be fear that it would happen again. It's because he's sympathetic and empathetic. It's because he loved his son so much, and also because he feels at fault for what happened to his son. And in so feeling at fault, it's as if he was the murderer of his son. And so would it even be ethically permissible for him to attempt to have a son again with the possibility that his son would die in the first 10 days of his life again? Note also the similarity to Stephen, who has been accused by Buck Mulligan of killing his wife. His response was, someone killed her. I think probably Joyce should have said something killed her. But so, Bloom is really carrying quite a bit with him. These weak pleasures, this Turkish bath, the smells of a lotion place. Think about going into a Hallmark store or a candle store. It's amazing, right? You smell the flowers, the cigarettes that he's surrounded with, and the drinks, and even religion. None of this keeps him from what is going on inside of him. None of it is strong enough to eliminate the feelings that he has. And you might say that the mind that he has is the sort of mind that is capable of supervening above the influences of those things which cause weak joy. All right, let's get to where we've been going for a while now. Hades and the funeral of Patty Dignan. Something interesting I need to say about this particular chapter. It comes very much out of order in terms of the episodes that occur in Homer's Odyssey. A lot of what comes right after Hades the Aeolus episode, the Lystragonians, these come prior to Hades. Hades is really very much a climax, almost at the very middle of the poem of the Odyssey in book 11 out of 24. And in the Hades episode, Odysseus is sent by Circe to this land, not quite going down into the earth as Virgil will do, and then later Dante, really imaginatively figuring the underworld. But he goes to the edge of a lake, Avernus, and there he has to make Odysseus has to make this liquid based on liquids of living things: milk, honey, blood, and spirits can drink from it, and then they become minded again. They're mindless shades. And when they drink of this mixture, they gain substance for a moment and can reveal some truth to Odysseus. He sees his mother, didn't know she was dead yet. got to hit him very hard. He has to say, I'm not here to see you. Who is he here to see? He's there to see the most famous prophet from ancient Greek mythology. If you read Oedipus Tyrannus, if you read Antigone, read the Iliad or the Odyssey, you know this figure. His name is Tiresias. He is blind prophet. Like Homer was himself a blind poet, like James Joyce himself became a very nearly blind bard himself, and John Milton as well. Tiresias alone of all the shades is capable of seeing the truth. And Tiresias is supposed to guide Odysseus to the path that will get him home safely. Odysseus will be the only person out of 12 ships of him and his companions that does make it home by the way. And so in Hades, Odysseus learns the path towards home. All right. Well, how does Hades start here in Ulysses? Martin Cunningham first poked his silk-hatted head into the creaky carriage, and entering deftly, seating himself, Mr. Power stepped in after him, curbing his height with care. So we have several men going to a funeral inside of a carriage. In Book 11 of Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus travels to the entrance of the land of the dead at the insistence of Circe in order to speak to Tiresias, the blind seer who maintains his wits even among the flitting shades. Odysseus there learns of Elpenor and his mother and Agamemnon's deaths, while also seeing heroes of old like Heracles. Elpenor was a crewman on Odysseus' ship, who the night before Odysseus goes to the underworld, apparently they have some sort of party. He gets drunk. He climbs to the roof of Circe's house, sleeps on the roof overnight, and then when he wakes up the next morning, he falls off of the roof and breaks his neck. He is often seen as an image of foolishness, of what can happen to one when one ingests the wrong things and gives up one's wits. The protection of Athena, you might call them. Athena does not defend fools or the drunken, as it were. And so, is there a correlate to Elpenor, this foolish drinker, who effectively kills himself, though a bit unintentionally, in the Odyssey? Well, something we find out about Paddy Dignam, whose last name Dignam, comes from the Latin word dignus, dignity, which means worth. And he's constantly talked about as if he were the best of all of us. And yet, what is it that we know about Paddy Dignam? What did he really, what has he added to the lives of those around him? Not very much. He was a barfly known for having a red nose and for having, and this is a sad way of putting it, but having abandoned his wife and children who needed him for his alcoholism. And so when people speak about Paddy, they say the sorts of eulogizing things that people say when somebody dies, regardless of the character of the person. Say, oh, he's the best of all of us. Oh, his death came out of nowhere. Oh, it's totally sad. And these things are true, but they're things that you can say about almost anybody. They're not very descriptive of the individuality of the person who has passed. And so something you note in this chapter is that nobody seems to know Paddy Dignam very well at all, because all they share about him are true isms that could be shared of almost anybody who died, which perhaps says something about the nature of a drug like alcohol. Perhaps it does rid you to some extent of your individuality or your ability to be an individual. And you might really think about that. People who are extremely merry and inebriated are often what we call de-individuated. So they feel very connected to everybody around them because they focus on the bland similarities between them. You're a person, I'm a person, let's sing some songs. Whereas when you have command of your wits, you often see things in a very much more distinct way. All right, so these gentlemen are heading to the funeral of Paddy Dignam. Leopold Bloom and Stephen's father, Simon Dedalus, join them, Mr. Power, as well as Martin Cunningham. Bloom notices Stephen on his way to Sandy Mountain Strand. He's wearing nice boots. Those happen to be Buck Mulligan's boots. He mentions Stephen to his father, Simon Dedalus. And Simon Dedalus thinks, oh, was he there with his scallywag friend, Buck Mulligan, or was he on the way to his Aunt Sally's? And but something that Bloom detects in Simon Dedalus is that he's very proud of his son. He knows that his son is gifted. And this is something that particularly Bloom would notice because, right, he doesn't have his son, and something that he does imagine, particularly in Nightown, he gets an actual vision of this. He thinks about his son growing up. This has to be one of the most terrible parts of having your child die on you, is that as he sees other children who would be similar age to Rudy growing up, he can imagine the sort of person that Rudy would have been. Just imagine ripping your heart out over and over again for such a feeling. And so Bloom again gets to feel a little bit like an outsider there. But Bloom finds himself singled out and excluded at least twice in the carriage. Another time, when the men in the carriage make fun of a local Jewish moneylender, Reuben J. Dodd, of the tribe of Reuben. That means being of the tribe means being Jewish. There's a vulgar way of saying it that I wouldn't recommend if you're not Jewish saying. And we have all been there. Martin Cunningham said broadly, his eyes met Bloom's eyes. He caressed his beard, adding, well, nearly all of us, Jewish moneylender. All of them have gone to it. They see Bloom as very similar, though of course we know from later on that Bloom is not the sort of person that gives in order to take more back in a usurious sort of interest way. It's the sort of person that gives and gives and gives. And so he's very different from this character, though they have an obvious superficial similarity. It'd be like if you had some English professor at some point that was terrible and you're like, you're just like an English professor, Professor Schmidt, and I'm like that. In some ways, but perhaps not in the most general ways at all times. In any case, once at the mission and the second time. So not only is he seen as this outside outcast Jewish individual, but also suicide is brought up. We know that his father Virak committed suicide, and in no uncertain language, Martin Cunningham calls it temporary insanity. But Mr. Power adds, the greatest disgrace to have in the family. Punch right in the face of Bloom. And okay, and let's see. Yes, and then 20 past 11, Mrs. Fleming is in to clean, doing her hair, humming, Volio a non voré, no voré, a non. Oh, that's terrible. So while he's thinking about what time it is, he thinks about the maid coming to clean his house. He thinks about the fact that she's often humming. What is she humming? She's humming one of the songs that Molly is going to sing under the tutelage of Blazes Boylan. He thinks of the song Voré et non voré, which is from La Cita Rem Domano, which is precisely when she's thinking, I want to, I don't want to, I want to, I will. And so again, suicide, his ethnicity that he didn't choose, what his wife is intending to do near the end of the day. These are afflictions that continue to afflict Bloom, even as he thinks of the physical nature of existence, as he thinks of the heart as just a pump, and there being many worn out pumps. He thinks when you are dead, you are dead. He is not very religious. And at the end of the chapter, just to put a dirty point on it, he sees scurrying about, what? Something like an angel, something like a messenger from God. No, filthy rat. All right, that's all we've got for today. Looking forward to seeing everyone.